You're sitting with a group of friends. The conversation is loud. Everyone is laughing. A few years ago, you would have been the loudest person there. You would have stayed until 2 in the morning. You would have said yes to almost anything: a spontaneous road trip, a random party, a risky opportunity, a relationship that made no sense. But now something feels different. At some point, without making a conscious decision, you started leaving earlier. You stopped chasing every invitation. You became more selective about who gets your time. You started caring less about impressing strangers and more about protecting your peace. And the strange part is, most people don't even notice when this change begins. One day they're in their 20s, convinced they'll always be the same person. Then suddenly they're 32 or 35 or 38. And they're looking at old photos wondering, what happened to me? Did life make them cynical? Did adulthood make them boring? Or is something deeper happening inside the human mind? Because across cultures, countries, and generations, millions of people experience a surprisingly similar shift after 30, not identical, but recognizable, a feeling that something fundamental has changed. And the reason is far more fascinating than most people realize. Think about how strange this really is. When we're children, we expect change. A 6-year-old is different from a 10-year-old. A 10-year-old is different from a 15-year-old. A teenager is different from a college student. Change feels normal, expected, obvious, but then something happens. People reach adulthood and quietly assume they've arrived, as if personality becomes permanent, as if the person they are at 25 will simply continue existing forever. Yet research consistently shows that's not what happens. Human beings continue changing throughout adulthood. In fact, some of the most important psychological changes happen long after people stop expecting them. The problem is that these changes happen gradually, not overnight. You don't wake up on your 30th birthday with a completely different brain. There is no dramatic moment, no flashing sign, no announcement. Instead, thousands of tiny experiences slowly reshape the way you see the world. A disappointment here, a success there, a heartbreak, a career setback, a friendship that fades away, a goal that finally gets achieved. Year after year, these experiences accumulate, and eventually they begin changing the person experiencing them. But that's only part of the story, because if life experience were the whole explanation, everyone would change in completely different ways, yet certain patterns appear again and again. People become more selective, more focused, more aware of consequences, less interested in proving themselves, less interested in social competition. Why? Why do so many humans experience similar shifts during the same stage of life? To answer that, we need to look at something most people never think about: the hidden relationship between time and identity. Imagine you're 20 years old. The future feels enormous, almost endless. You have decades ahead of you, countless opportunities, countless friendships, countless experiences, countless second chances. Time feels abundant, and when something feels abundant, humans treat it differently. Think about money. Someone with $10 spends differently than someone with 10 million. The same principle applies to time. When people are young, time feels limitless. As a result, they're naturally more willing to explore, to experiment, to take risks, to say yes. Psychologists sometimes describe this as an expansive mindset. The future appears wide open. Every experience feels like it might lead somewhere important. A random conversation, a new hobby, a move to another city, a strange opportunity. Everything feels possible, but as people move through adulthood, something subtle begins to happen. The perception of time changes, not actual time, perceived time. For the first time, people start recognizing that life is finite, not intellectually, emotionally. There's a difference. Most 20-year-olds know they'll eventually grow old, but they don't feel it. After 30, many people begin feeling it. Not because they're old, they're not, but because the future no longer feels infinite. It feels valuable. And when something feels valuable, humans become more selective about how they spend it. This realization quietly changes behavior. Suddenly, every invitation isn't worth accepting. Every friendship isn't worth maintaining. Every argument isn't worth winning. Every opportunity isn't worth chasing. For the first time, many people begin asking a different question. Not, what can I gain? But what deserves my limited time? And that question changes everything. Here's where things get strange. Most people believe they become less adventurous after 30. Less exciting, less spontaneous. But that isn't necessarily true. In many cases, the opposite is happening. They aren't becoming less interested in life. They're becoming more interested in what actually matters to them. A 20-year-old might spend enormous energy trying to become someone. A 35-year-old often spends enormous energy trying to figure out who they already are, and those are very different missions. For years, many humans build their identity around external signals: status, approval, recognitions, popularity, achievement. But eventually reality starts teaching uncomfortable lessons. Sometimes success doesn't feel the way you expected. Sometimes popularity doesn't create happiness. Sometimes reaching the goal reveals another empty goal waiting behind it. These experiences slowly force people inward, toward deeper questions. Questions they avoided when life felt unlimited. Questions like, who am I when nobody is watching? What do I actually want? What kind of life feels meaningful? And once those questions appear, it's difficult to ignore them because they change the way you see everything. If there's one thing that quietly changes after 30, it's this. Humans become harder to fool, not because they become smarter overnight, but because experience starts creating patterns. Think about a teenager touching a hot stove. The lesson is immediate, pain creates knowledge. Life works the same way, except the lessons take longer. A failed relationship teaches something, a broken friendship teaches something else. A toxic workplace, a betrayal, a success that wasn't satisfying, a dream that didn't turn out the way you imagined. Over time, these experiences accumulate, and the brain begins doing something remarkable. It starts filtering. When you're younger, almost every possibility feels worth exploring. When you're older, your mind starts recognizing familiar outcomes, not with certainty, but with probability. You begin seeing patterns before they fully unfold. The friend who only calls when they need something, the opportunity that sounds too good to be true, the argument that will solve nothing. The relationship dynamic you've experienced before, the excitement that usually fades after a few weeks. You've seen enough repetitions to recognize the shape of things, and this changes behavior from the outside. It can look like people have become cautious, but often they've simply become efficient. They're no longer spending energy learning the same lesson 10 different times. They're protecting attention for things that matter, and attention may be the most valuable resource humans possess. Because unlike money, attention can never be earned back. Once a day is gone, it's gone forever. This shift doesn't just affect decisions, it changes relationships. In your 20s, friendships often happen naturally: school, college, shared apartments, parties, workplaces. You're constantly surrounded by new people. Connection feels effortless. But after 30, many people experience something unexpected. Their social circle shrinks, and this can feel alarming. Some friendships disappear, others become occasional. People get busy, they move away, they start families. Careers become demanding. Responsibilities multiply. At first, it can feel like loss, and sometimes it is, but something else is happening too. Humans begin prioritizing depth over quantity. The need for social approval slowly weakens. The need for genuine connection grows stronger. A single meaningful friendship becomes more valuable than 20 superficial ones. A peaceful evening with trusted people becomes more satisfying than a crowded room full of acquaintances. This surprises many people because society often equates more with better. More friends, more followers, more attention, more invitations. But psychological satisfaction rarely works that way. Many people discover after 30 that what they wanted all along wasn't more connection, it was better connection, not being surrounded by people, being understood by people. And those are completely different experiences. There's another change happening beneath the surface, a change that might be the most important of all. Identity becomes less performative. Think back to adolescence. Much of youth involves experimentation, different clothes, different interests, different friend groups, different versions of yourself. You're constantly asking, who am I? But hidden inside that question is another one: who should I be? For years, many people build themselves around expectations. Family expectations, cultural expectations, social expectations, professional expectations, the expectations of strangers. And often, without realizing it, they spend years trying to become a version of themselves that earns approval. Then something strange happens. Life begins removing illusions, not all at once. Gradually, you discover that pleasing everyone is impossible. You discover that criticism never completely disappears. You discover that no achievement permanently solves insecurity. You discover that people forget your mistakes much faster than you do. And perhaps most importantly, you discover that nobody is thinking about you as much as you imagined. At first, this realization can feel disappointing, but eventually it becomes liberating. Because if nobody is constantly watching, you are free to pursue what genuinely matters, free to change your mind, free to outgrow old identities, free to become more authentic. For many people, this is the real transformation after 30, not becoming older, becoming less trapped by other people's expectations. Here's the paradox. Many people spend their 20s trying to find freedom, yet they often feel constrained by comparison, by competition, by expectations, by uncertainty. Then they reach their 30s. Life becomes more complicated, more responsibilities, more commitments, more obligations, and yet many people report feeling psychologically freer. Why? For many people, this is the real transformation after 30, not becoming older, becoming less trapped by other people's expectations. Here's the paradox. Many people spend their 20s trying to find freedom, yet they often feel constrained by comparison, by competition, by expectations, by uncertainty. Then they reach their 30s. Life becomes more complicated, more responsibilities, more commitments, more obligations, and yet many people report feeling psychologically freer. Why? Because freedom isn't always the absence of responsibility. Sometimes freedom is clarity, knowing what matters, knowing what doesn't, knowing which battles deserve your energy, knowing which opinions deserve your attention, knowing who you are and who you are not. That kind of clarity is difficult to achieve without experience, and experience requires time, which means some forms of freedom can only be earned by living long enough to understand yourself. There's another reason humans often feel different after 30, and it has nothing to do with age itself. It has to do with perspective. When you're young, life is mostly about the future, the next year, the next relationship, the next achievement, the next chapter. You're always moving towards something. But eventually something changes for the first time. You have enough past behind you to compare against the future ahead. You can see entire chapters of your life, not days, not weeks, years. You can look back and see former versions of yourself. The insecure version, the ambitious version, the reckless version, the heartbroken version, the hopeful version, the version who thought certain people would stay forever, the version who thought certain dreams would solve everything, and suddenly you realize something strange. Every one of those people was you, yet none of them fully exist anymore. This realization can be unsettling because it forces humans to confront a truth they spend most of their lives avoiding. You are not a fixed person. You never were. The self feels permanent, but it isn't. Your beliefs change, your priorities change, your fears change, your desires change, your relationships change, even your memories change. The person reading these words today is already different from the person you were 10 years ago. And the person you'll be 10 years from now will look back at your current self with the same sense of distance. Humans often imagine identity as a statue, solid, permanent, finished. But identity is closer to a river, always moving, always changing, even when it appears still. There's another mystery many people notice after 30 years begin feeling shorter. A decade that once seemed endless suddenly feels like a brief chapter. Birthdays arrive faster. Seasons pass more quickly. Months disappear. And this isn't just imagination. Psychologists have proposed several explanations. One of the most compelling involves novelty. When you're young, almost everything is new. New schools, new experiences, new friendships, new discoveries. The brain pays close attention because everything is unfamiliar. Those memories become densely packed, rich with detail. As a result, that period of life feels long when you look back on it. But adulthood often becomes more predictable. Routines emerge, patterns repeat, days begin resembling one another. And when fewer unique memories are created, entire years can feel compressed in retrospect. This creates a strange effect. Life feels faster, not because time has changed, but because your relationship with time has changed. And perhaps this is another reason people become more intentional after 30. They're beginning to recognize that time is not merely passing. It's disappearing, not in a frightening way, in a valuable way. Every year becomes more meaningful because every year becomes more visible. People often talk about aging as if it's only loss, loss of youth, loss of energy, loss of opportunity. But that perspective misses something important because every stage of life gains something too. And one of the greatest gains after 30 is perspective. Perspective allows you to survive disappointments that once felt catastrophic. Perspective allows you to recognize what truly matters. Perspective allows you to recover from failure faster. Perspective allows you to stop treating every setback as the end of the story. A younger person might see a closed door. An older person often sees a detour, not because they're more optimistic, because they've lived long enough to watch life surprise them again and again. They've seen terrible situations improve. They've seen impossible situations resolve themselves. They've seen dreams fail and better opportunities appear later. Experience creates resilience, not perfect resilience, but stronger resilience, and that resilience changes how humans move through the world. Maybe humans don't suddenly change after 30. Maybe they simply become more visible to themselves. The noise starts fading. The performance starts fading. The pressure to become someone starts fading. And underneath it all, something more honest begins to emerge. Not a new person, the person who was always there. Because growing older isn't really about becoming someone else. It's about gradually removing the versions of yourself that were built for other people, until one day you look back at your life and realize something unexpected. The biggest change wasn't that you became older. The biggest change was that you finally started becoming yourself.